Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of KRAD COVID Readings. I'm Keith R.A. DeCandido, reading fun things to entertain you to make the pandemic palatable. In 2015, eSpec Books produced a flip book. It was an anthology called The Side of Good and The Side of Evil. Half the stories are about superheroes and half the stories are about supervillains. To that end, I provided a story for the evil side, which is called Send in the Clones, which takes place in Super City, which is also where the Super City Police Department novel, The Case of the Claw, takes place. The short story Stone Cold Whodunit, which I read in an earlier KRAD COVID reading, which was in With Great Power, as well as 3 novellas under the banner of Super City Cops, which includes Avenging Amethyst and Undercover Blues and Secret Identities, which are available as ebooks. And I've got 4 more novellas coming from Falstaff Books sometime in the next year or so. So this story is called Send in the Clones, a tale of the Super City Police Department. Who's in the interrogation room? Detective Kristen Milewski, who had simply not had enough coffee yet, stared intently at Officer M.C. Cunningham as she asked the question. For her part, Cunningham looked very reluctant to answer. I think it's the Clone Master. You think? Well, he looks just like him, but he's dressed up in that silly white outfit that all his henchmen wear. And he just showed up. Cunningham nodded. Came in, went straight to the sergeant's desk, wearing the whole outfit, saying he had to talk to a detective about the Clone Master. Then he took off the mask, and it was the Clone Master. Sarge had me take him up to interrogation too, and, well, you two are the only ones here. Milewski turned to face her partner, Detective Jorge Alvarado, who held up both hands. What you looking at me for? I don't even remember which one the Clone Master is. Alvarado recently moved to Super City from Baltimore, and he still hadn't gotten all the superheroes and supervillains straight in his head yet. Though he should have recalled this one, as he was the scourge of the Homicide Squad. Clone Master's the one who keeps dying and then coming back. He's probably the most reckless of the costumes out there, and he's always getting himself knocked off. Every time that happens, one of us has to perform a death investigation because the annotated code says that every time a body falls in Super City, the SCPD must perform an investigation. Which, for the Clone Master, is a huge waste of time because he somehow always comes back. She turned to Cunningham, and he's in there now. Disguised as one of his henchmen, yeah. I don't get it either, but he said he wanted a detective, so... The uniformed officer shrugged. Milewski stared at Alvarado, then stared at Cunningham, then declared, I need more coffee. Once she poured some of the squad room sludge into the mug her mother gave her when she made detective, she led Alvarado into the video room. The interrogation rooms all had cameras that fed to monitors here. In her years on the job, Milewski had never actually encountered the Clone Master in person. The last 2 times he died, and there was the usual abortive investigation, Fisher and Billinghurst had handled it. Both instances were right after she got promoted to homicide from Vice. She had seen his face a few times, though, in news reports, and once in the morgue when the ME was working on one of his clones. The person she saw on the monitor for interrogation 2 matched her memory of that face. Large nose, weak chin, beady eyes, and tiny ears. He was drumming his fingers on the battered metal table in the center of the room, and rocking back and forth in the metal chair. That seat was uneven and squeaky and uncomfortable, all of which was quite deliberate, since the people who sat there were intended to be made as uncomfortable as possible. The one difference was that this one didn't have a right eyebrow. That's the guy? Alvarado asked. Milewski nodded. And he's wearing the same outfit as thugs wear. All the guys who help him out on his jobs wear that froofy, all-white thing that makes them look like low-rent Jedi, plus hoods to hide their faces. That's gotta fuck up their peripheral vision. Probably, yeah. Milewski gulped down the rest of her coffee, which burned her throat a bit. Let's dig out the case files on the last couple Clone Master deaths, and then we'll see what he's got to say. They went to the file cabinets and retrieved the files in question, and then went into the interrogation room. The Clone Master stopped drumming his fingers and sat up straight. Finally! I'm Detective Milewski, this is Detective Alvarado. You must be the Clone Master? I'm Marcos Balidimaj, yes. Or rather, I'm clone number 78. I mean, I'm both. I'm a clone of the Clone Master. Milewski sat down across from him, placing the 2 folders in front of her, while Alvarado chose instead to lean against the far wall. So, what do we call you, Mr. 78? Or can we be casual and call you Clone? I wish I could answer, but I'm having trouble keeping track of who I am. Okay. Well, you came to us, so, why don't you tell Detective Alvarado and I what it is you want to say? He took a very deep breath. I want to enumerate all the crimes committed by all the various versions of Marcos Balidimaj since 2007. Alvarado asked, Isn't that when the Clone Master first showed up? Of course, the clone said as if it was the stupidest question ever. He's new, Milewski said quickly. I remember when he, or you, whatever, first showed up. You took on Old Glory and got your ass kicked, but you got away. 2 weeks later, the Bruiser fought you and you were killed. Everyone figured that was the end of it, and nobody understood why you were called the Clone Master. And then another Clone Master arrived to do battle with the Superior Six, when you also died. Balidimaj smiled. Well, I, or rather the Clone Master, can afford to be reckless. Alvarado came off the wall and moved toward the table. All right, hold it a second. I'm getting a fucking migraine. Are you the Clone Master or not? I am, and I'm not. Looking down at the seated Milewski, Alvarado said, I don't know about you, but that just made my migraine worse. Milewski, however, looked right at Balidimaj's beady eyes. How can you be both? Because Marcos Balidimaj was a genius when he was alive. I know because his personality lives on in me. All right, this is some bullshit. Alvarado moved toward the door. I don't gotta listen to this. Looking straight at Milewski with those damned eyes, Balidimaj said, You don't believe me, do you, Detective Milewski? No, but I don't disbelieve you either. First homicide I caught was the Claw case. My ex-partner and I broke that case on the basis of a place that I swear to Christ is called Dimension X, and it turns people into evil versions of themselves. For that matter, Alvarado's first case involved dimensional travel, so I'm not defaulting to bullshit just yet. But you want to hear more. Like I said, you came to us. Balidimaj nodded. Okay, here's the story. I'm clone number 78. About 35 years ago, a brilliant scientist named Marcos Balidimaj made an amazing discovery. Alvarado, who was now leaning by the door as if ready to bolt at a moment's notice, rolled his eyes. We know, he discovered cloning. Oh, no, Detective. Balidimaj shook a finger back and forth. No, his father discovered cloning back in the 1950s. No, it was in 1986 that he made the much more important breakthrough. See, cloning's easy if you have the right equipment. Now, the problem is that a clone looks just like you, has all your genetic characteristics, writes with the same hand, but it doesn't have the same experiences. It isn't you. It's your twin, and twins aren't the same person. Okay, Milewski said with a glance at a very confused-looking Alvarado. What did Balidimaj figure out in 1986? How to transfer someone's mental pattern into another person. Alvarado was shaking his head. What, so he can move his mind into someone else's body? Yes, Detective. You know, he said, I've seen a lot of crazy-ass shit in this job, especially since I moved here to Super City, but mind switching? Come on, that's a bad Star Trek episode. What I want to know, Milewski said, is why you, or he, or who the fuck ever, didn't just patent this thing and sell it. Because there are side effects, Balidimaj said. Mental instability being the biggie. He couldn't get any funding to continue the research, mostly because he used a bunch of alien tech his dad salvaged back in the 50s during that big invasion. Nobody legit trusted that stuff. Milewski nodded. So he worked on his own. He inherited a lot of money from his family, and he had some patents. And then he had the breakthrough in 86, so he created 250 clones. At that, Milewski dropped her pencil. Alvarado reached down to pick it up. Thanks, she said. Did you say 250? Yes, Detective. And you're 78. He nodded. There were a few that didn't work out, but yes, the original Marcos Balidimaj died when he went up against Old Glory back in 07. Wait, I don't get it, Alvarado said. Why'd he wait so long? Well, clones age at the same rate as everyone else, Detective, Balidimaj, or rather his clone, said. They don't pop out fully grown. They had to age to maturity, which is why he waited as long as he did. In fact, he might have waited longer, but he was running out of money. You might recall that his first battle against Old Glory was a bank robbery. So when he died, what happened? Balidimaj hesitated. Before I can explain that, I should explain what our lives were like growing up. We were, indoctrinated. We were taught that the Clone Master was our god, basically. Our only mandate was to serve him. Everything we did in service of the Clone Master, who would take over the world and we would be his chosen ones. You believe this shit? Alvarado asked. For a long time, Detective, it was all I knew. Are you religious? Raised Catholic, Alvarado muttered. And when you were a boy, did you believe? Yeah. Then I became a cop. Milewski chuckled, then said to Belitimaj, So you got no other experiences? He shook his head. We weren't allowed outside the compound. What compound? Sorry, the estate that Belitimaj's family owns over in Willingham Gardens, outside of town. Milewski shot Alvarado a look. He gave a quick nod, then said, I'm sick of this shit. You want to listen to this asshole, Milewski? Knock yourself out. He stormed out. Belitimaj looked at the door as he slammed it shut. Your partner doesn't believe me? He sounded crestfallen. In fact, he was storming out under the pretense of digging up information on the estate mentioned. But good cop, bad cop was cliche for a reason. It still worked as a tactic. Like I said, he's new. Milewski leaned forward. So you were indoctrinated by the Clone Master for all your lives. And also trained. We learned various martial arts and got weapons training. We had excellent medical care and only the healthiest food. No wonder he ran out of money. Smiling, Belitimaj said, Actually, he ran out of money before that, but he had loans and credit and such. Those have all been paid back thanks to our successful criminal enterprises. So, the Clone Master has 250 people who look just like him, worship the ground he walks on, handy as henchmen, and his repositories. He took a deep breath. The breakthrough in 86 was a way to wipe someone's mind and replace those engrams with somebody else's. When the first Clone Master died, his mind was transferred to the supercomputer we have in the basement of the compound. The engrams only last an hour or two in the computer before they break down into component memories without a personality. Not sure why, but all the tests I did, well, he did, you know what I mean. They showed that the engrams didn't hold together as a personality in the computer for long. Milewski frowned. Okay, this leads me to ask how those tests were performed. Belitimaj looked away. On homeless people and other indigents. I told you I'd provide a list of crimes. Those tests are among them. Wonderful. She leaned back in her chair. Go on. First Clone Master died. Then what? His engrams were automatically transferred to the computer. Clone number 4 then got into the chair, and clone number 10 operated the transfer. Dare I ask what happened to 1 through 3 and 5 through 9? That got a wince. It wasn't pretty. Holding up a hand, Milewski said, I don't need to know any more then. So, number 4 got to be the new Clone Master? Belitimaj nodded. The machine wiped his own memories and imprinted mine, or rather, Belitimaj's, onto his mind. He was now the Clone Master, and the rest of us followed him. And this kept happening. Yes. Belitimaj blew out a breath. Until me. Do you recall the last time Clone Master died? Milewski pointed at one of the folders on the desk and then opened it. I didn't catch the case, but I remember Fisher and Billinghurst bitching about it. I don't remember the specifics, though. That was right after the Claw case finished up, so I was busy with that. She glanced at the case file. And that was the night of that alien invasion during a rainstorm. Right. Well, the storm was pretty nasty. So nasty, in fact, that the lightning struck the estate when the transfer was happening. See, the Clone Master died when he jumped off that roof. Why did he jump off the roof, anyhow? According to Detective Billinghurst's notes, he just seemed to jump, but the rain washed away all the physical evidence, so they weren't sure what happened. I misjudged the distance. He shook his head. I mean, he did. The cowboy was chasing me, him, whatever, and I jumped, trying to make it to the next roof over. Milewski rolled her eyes. Of course, the cowboy just left the scene. Asshole. The cowboy was more of a show-off than a superhero. Unlike the bruiser, who actually cooperated with the police, the cowboy was an irritant who mostly just got in the way. People loved him, though, so he always got a free pass. Anyhow, Belitimaj said, I was next up in the chair. I got in, thinking it was a great honor to become the vessel for the new Clone Master, and then lightning struck during the transfer. It was horrible, sending a nasty shock through my system, and I got a few electrical burns. He pointed to his right eye. That's how I lost the eyebrow, not to mention half the hair on my right arm. And worse, something went wrong with the transfer. I got all the Clone Master's memories, obviously, but clone number 78 wasn't wiped. Milewski nodded in understanding. So you remember being clone number 78 and being the Clone Master? He nodded right back. It's been a nightmare. My whole life was a lie. I was raised to believe that the Clone Master loved us and we'd be rewarded when he finally took over the world, but it was all a lie. He was just using you guys as warm bodies. Oh, it's worse than that, Detective. He didn't even want to take over the world. The whole point of it all was that we'd be by his side when he ruled everything, but he didn't want to rule everything. He just wanted more money. Shaking her head, Milewski said, "That's all anybody wants." She shuddered, remembering her time in narcotics, when everything that ever occurred was motivated entirely by money, whether the dealers trying to make money off addicts, or the addicts trying to get money so they could buy the drugs, and moving to homicide didn't really change much. On those occasions when the motive wasn't related to money, it was generally related to sex. So here are the crimes that... Milewski held up a hand. Hold on. At this point, I really need to read you your rights. After spending half an hour or so having Belitimaj read and initial all the paragraphs, and then finally sign the forms indicating that he waived his right to remain silent and his right to counsel, Milewski then took his statement enumerating all the crimes committed by Marcos Belitimaj over the past 4 decades or so. While that was going on, Alvarado had called the chief prosecutor's office, and they sent a deputy prosecutor over. Michael Spilla and his rather unfortunate comb-over were sitting in the guest seat at Alvarado's desk. "Hey, Kristen," Spilla said. "Jorge here's been filling me in." She tossed a yellow legal pad onto the desk, which landed with a resounding thwap. "Well, here's the statement. I'll have Zelda type it up all nice and formal into the computer." A buzzing came from Spilla's jacket pocket. He pulled it out and looked at the display. "My master calls. Give me a sec." He got up, put the phone to his ear, and said, "Yeah, boss." Alvarado stared after him. "He calls the CP boss?" "Why not?" Milewski shrugged. "What'd you get on the compound?" Indicating the monitor of his computer with his head, Alvarado said, "The property's owned by a trust that was started back in 1951 by Emil Belitimaj." "That's Marcos's father." Alvarado nodded. "Apparently, Emil was a hotshot scientist at Caltech, and then he worked for the Army. They had him on Project Flying Saucer back in the day until he got fired for cause and nobody ever heard from him again." Milewski nodded. "That tracks with the statement." Spilla was wandering back toward the desk. "Understood. Talk to you later." He hit end on his phone and shoved it back into his pocket. "So, Mike," Milewski said, "we got enough for a warrant on the Clone Master's compound?" "Nope. In fact, we don't have enough to prosecute. File the statement if you want, but as far as the CP's concerned, there's no case here. Kick him." Milewski stared blankly at Spilla. "Excuse me?" He held up both hands. "Not my decision, Kristen. Look, that guy in there?" He pointed at the interrogation room. "He didn't actually commit any of the crimes he just confessed to. They were all committed by other people who are now dead." "Bullshit! If you run the prints and DNA that we found on all the open cases connected to him, they'll all match the guy we got in interrogation too. And then his lawyer will subpoena the DNA of the 80 gajillion corpses that have dropped since 2007. Spilla let out a long, deep breath. "Look, this case is the textbook definition of reasonable doubt. This Belitimaj guy figured out a way to commit the perfect crime. Besides, the only case we have on him is for a bunch of robberies, B&Es, and assaults. He's never killed anyone. He's low priority by costume bad guy standards. Trust me, the CP won't touch this case with a 10-foot pole. You gotta kick him." Alvarado was shaking his head. "You gotta be fucking kidding me. Like I said, not my decision. Believe me, I'd love to prosecute this jackass, but I just go where my boss tells me." "Yeah," Milewski sighed. "I'm still having Zelda type up the statement. I want it on file." "Knock yourself out. Maybe someday he'll kill someone and the CP will give more of a shit. Or maybe he'll run out of clones." Spilla shrugged and headed toward one of the other interrogation rooms. "I gotta go see a man about a dog." "Who talks like that?" Alvarado asked. "Actually, he really does. The bruiser brought in Canis last night, and he's trying to work out a plea deal." At Alvarado's blank look, Milewski added, "Canis is part human, part dog." "This town is seriously fucked up." Milewski stared at the door to interrogation 2. "Yeah." 3 days later, Milewski and Alvarado got called to a double homicide in an alley behind the Senate building. The reporting officers, who had parked their blue and white at the mouth of the alley, looked slightly weirded out. "According to the witnesses," one of them said, "the Clone Master was going at it on the roof with one of his thugs." The other added, "I ain't never seen a bad guy beat the shit out of his henchmen before. Crazy stuff." Milewski and Alvarado exchanged glances. He asked her, "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Instead of actually responding, Milewski went into the alley, where someone from the medical examiner's office was kneeling over the body of the Clone Master. Putting the latex gloves on, Milewski went to the other body, that of the white-robed henchman. She pulled off the hood to reveal a face that looked exactly like that of the Clone Master, with one exception. He didn't have a right eyebrow. The ME stood up. Best I can tell, they both fell from the top of the building. I've got multiple broken bones, contusions, and the like. I won't know the specific CODs until I get them on the table, but I'm guessing they both died from the trauma of colliding with the ground at high speeds. Thanks, Doc. Milewski sighed and got to her feet. What do you think happened? Alvarado asked. My guess is the other clones realized their new clone master wasn't right in the head, so they downloaded another one into that guy. She pointed at the guy in the clone master's costume. Meanwhile, number 78 over here figured out the law wasn't going to help, so he tried to stop the clone master himself. Obviously, he didn't succeed. Maybe he did. I mean, look, the clone master's dead. Milewski sighed. He's been dead before. It never takes. Come on, let's process this nightmare for all the good it'll do. That story can be found in The Side of Good, The Side of Evil, published by eSpec Books. Currently, during the pandemic, all eSpec's ebooks are available for only 99 cents. You can get this book, which has stories by Dayton Ward, Peter David, James Chambers, Aaron Rosenberg, Janine Spenlove, Drew Bittner, Brian L. Glass, who else? Gail Z. Martin, Larry N. Martin, John L. French, Walt Chichanowski, I probably mispronounced that, and Kathleen David and Robert Greenberger. So check that out. Check me out online at DeCandido.net. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel by clicking on the little bell that you see. Check my blog at DeCandido.wordpress.com. And please, if you can, support me on Patreon at patreon.com/KRAD. There's all sorts of cool stuff there. Please stay safe. I'll see you all soon.